everyone, and welcome to the Human Design Podcast with me, your host, Emma Dunwoody. I'm a qualified master coach and human behaviour specialist, as well as being a qualified human design coach. And I work with clients every single day to answer the big questions. Who am I? Why am I here? And what is my purpose? I also assist them to transition from the person they think they should be to the person they really are on the inside. I teach people how to actually live their design instead of just knowing it. And if this is something that you want to do too, well, stay tuned or reach out for private coaching or Human Design Unpacks, where I show you exactly how to live your design. Hey everyone, and welcome to this episode of the Human Design Podcast. Before we get into today's episode, I want to share something really amazing with you. And it's actually one of our new Millions of Millionaires sponsors. So to introduce this body graph chart software that we've been using that's been mind-blowing. So I want to welcome the amazing Taylor Dyson, who is my incredible operations manager. Welcome along, Taylor.
Hi, thanks for having me.
I'm so excited to have you here. This is actually something that we implemented when?
April.
Yeah.
And this year.
We were just trialing it out because they'd reached out to us in regards to sponsoring the podcast or something like that, wasn't it? And so it kind of wasn't even on our radar. And we tried it out and we had such low expectations. And then what happened?
Well, I remember sending you a message going, Emma, why are we not using this? Because I was mind blown. You know, we get a lot of requests for stuff like that. And, you know, there's new softwares all the time. And I clicked on it, like you said, with very low expectations. And I started looking through what they can do. And I got so excited. You know, the MG in me was like, oh my God, we have to use this. And I saw the potential of it. And it has delivered more than expected. It's really awesome.
Amazing. Now, before we get into the actual numbers, because I know numbers with Taylor is a thing in our business. She loves to share all the numbers. Let's just tell the listeners exactly who it's for and what it is.
Yeah, so it's a great tool for anyone who uses human design in their business. So if you're a human design reader, a human design coach, or just someone who uses human design in your business, if you incorporate it into whatever you do, it's a way for you to embed an actual human design chart tool into your website. So, you know, if you want someone to get their human design chart, you probably send them to an outside platform somewhere, go to this website, put in your details and get your chart, whatever that platform might be. There's a couple big ones. And what's cool about this is that it allows you to put that tool on your own website and it's yours. So when someone comes and, puts their information into your website, they get their chart, and then you can hook it up to your email list, to your newsletter. You can have it linked to your own content. You can customize the reports afterwards that they get, so it's your own descriptions of what, this type is or this profile. So that's kind of what it is.
Oh my God, I love it. And it's so cool because I actually remember when Jenna Zoe, because it must be the same software that Jenna Zoe used and before anyone else. Yeah, right. And I was always like, wow, her chart looks so beautiful and it's on her website. That's so cool. So yeah, when we started using it, I was like, this is beautiful. I'm really excited that we can do it. But let's talk hard numbers. Like we have had some serious success with this, just adding this to our business. So tell everyone a little bit about the growth that we've experienced through using this.
Yeah. So since implementing it into our website in April, there have been over 4,000 people that have downloaded their chart through the website. And that's unique. That's not, someone who does it twice, because a lot of people, they'll go back because they won't download the PDF or something, or they lost it or misplaced it. That's unique. Chart downloads. So it's even more for people doing it twice. And it's been really amazing. It's more than tripled the size of the email list. And, you can set up sequences afterwards for people to, give them more information and keep everything in-house.
Yeah. And because one of the really big things for us is obviously human design made simple. So it gives us the opportunity to give our way of teaching human design directly to the people who want it. And I love that. I love that every single person that wants to get their chart, that downloads it, we can then support them on their journey straight away, which is, of course, what you set up, because you're amazing, to make sure that not only do they get their chart, but they also get this support free content support that helps them as they're, new to human design and on their journey. So beautiful. So how do people access this? What's it called? And I know that there's a benefit for listeners of the podcast.
Yes. So you can go to the link in the show notes, or you can go to bodygraphchart.com. And they have been kind enough to give the listeners of the Human Design Podcast a 50% off discount for 12 months, which is huge because it's already inexpensive to begin with. And then the 50% discount is going to put it at $25 a month. That's in US dollars. So wherever you are in the world, it'll be, a little bit different, but 50% off for 12 months. And the code is Human Design Podcast. And we'll put that in the show notes too for everyone. And one of the other things I want to say that's really cool about this chart tool is that it's 100% customizable, and it actually gives Chiron and the 4 arrows, which is what a lot of chart tools don't do that. So that's one thing that a lot of people are drawn to when they go to get our chart from our website is, I can get the arrows because of it, or my Chiron gates.
I love that. It's so cool. So check out the show notes, people. Get on it, because really it is such a powerful and, as Taylor says, inexpensive tool. Like, it paid for itself in the first 2 days, I seem to remember, or first day, I seem to remember. So it's so valuable, and it gives you the opportunity to really build your brand and your communication with your clients. So thank you. Go check it out. Hey, everyone. Welcome to today's episode. And today I have a brilliant guest for you. She is an author, amongst other things, which I'm going to share with you in a minute. And I tell you what, if I had her book, Quarter Life, at 28, oh my goodness, it would have been so powerful back then. It was beautiful and powerful now. But for quarter lifers, which is this time 15 to, or at least your late teens or your teen years to just before your Uranus opposition, your late 30s. Wow. It just made so much sense. But anyway, there's a whole episode. Before I get into this amazing interview, I actually want to tell you all a story about you, about some specific feedback that I get all the time. It all started, and it might have been before Jess Bubico, but the one that I consciously remember is the first time Jess Bubico was on the podcast. She said, I don't know what you're doing, but the people who come to me from your podcast or that you've worked with, they're just a whole different caliber of human. And I was like, oh, wow, what a freaking compliment. Oh my God, I must be doing something right. But this is about you guys, like one of the things that I pride myself on. So therefore, and remember, this is how energy works. This is the same thing that you're putting out there. It's like, I don't know if you've ever heard the word, people talk about fractals. It's our fractals. It's why it matters who we're being. And one of my keynotes, ever since I took responsibility for my life after, recovering from, or as I was healing my mental health, one of the fundamental keys to that was taking full responsibility for the results that I was getting in my life, moving from that victim state, moving from excuses, needing to be right, siding with fear, all of those things, and shifting into a place where, well, I'm investing my money, I'm going to take the actions, and I'm just going to imperfectly implement. I'm going to take responsibility, give things greater meaning. I am ready. And for a number of years, that's who I am as a client. I am ready. If I work with you, I'm all in, and I'm going to do the work and show up. And what I want to tell you guys is this is the feedback I get from you guys. I've heard it from Liz Zamorsky. I've heard it most recently from Frank Elleriti. I've heard it from Heather Ivany. Like, all of the people that are coming from here, from this audience, from our community that we're building, and go there, you're rock stars. And I want to say thank you for representing. I want to say you guys are awesome. This is how we change our lives. We take responsibility. We say, I'm ready, even though we're afraid. We invest in ourselves, and then we expand. We face our shadows. We do the scary things. We imperfectly implement. We're willing to change. We're willing to take the risk. And if you're one of those people out there who is listening and you love the podcast and you've got the chart from the website and you're like, I want that. I want to feel that belief. I want to feel that possibility. I want to feel ready and all in. Then this is your invitation. This is your invitation. We are here to transform your life. We have everything everything we can possibly give you. However, you're the one who has to make the decision. You're the one that has to invest in yourself. You're the one that has to learn what is true for you and how you can thrive. And ultimately, probably, let's be honest, heal first, align to your design, and then thrive. But it takes taking action. It takes trusting your strategy and authority. It takes taking risks, because at the end of the day, that is what is going to make the difference, because the behavior that got you into whatever challenge you're facing is not the behavior that's going to get you out of it. One of the things for me I hear so often, so many people, there's two types of people that join HDX. Number one is someone who is new to human design. They want to learn the knowledge. They want to learn within a community that they feel supported and run their experiment. And then the other type of person that tends to join HDX is someone who, and it literally just happened the other day, someone who has certified elsewhere and they're challenged because they want to integrate it. They want to feel really confident to coach with human design. They want to integrate it more deeply into their lives, into their clients' lives. And this is something that I think is a challenge with human design at the moment, because it's like, there's so much information, but how do you get results? And this is always, for me, the only thing that matters is, are we getting results? I don't need to know all of it. I don't need to be the smartest in the room. I don't need to be the most educated in the room. But this line 3 wants an experience of getting results. And my line 5, practicality, wants to give you everything that you need to get results. Because otherwise, what's the point? So if you have even half thought about joining HDX, do it. Because we've created something so different, so new. And with these panels, we have got so much in real life experience of type, strategy, authority, the centers, and now we're doing the profile panels and things that the knowledge isn't telling us. This is real life experience. So if you're a coach or you're starting your journey or you're confused, confused by all the information out there, what's true for you, what resonates, why doesn't that resonate? HDX is the place to come play and become a boss in your design and, maybe the design of others. So stop pussyfooting around, come and join us, have an amazing adventure, completely transform your life, and finally have simple clarity around your human design. And of course, you're going to have fun with us too. We've got something really exciting that we're building around marketing with human design, and no one has done this before, and it's only going to be available for HDX members, and it's happening, I think, in November, but that's all you're going to hear for now. So come join us, jump in, take the action like so many of the people listening to this podcast are already doing, because you can't change your mind, you can't change your life with the same thinking. You have to change the way you think, behave, and feel to transform your life. So exciting. So one more shout out. You lot are awesome. Thank you so much. I think we got even more reviews this week. Like, far out. You are rocking it. And I really, really appreciate it, because it means we can get the podcast into the hands of the people that need it. And can I just throw in one other little thing? Go and give your friend's podcast a 5-star rating. Just go do it. Just be that person that gives any podcast a rating. Be on their team, support them, so that what you put out, you're going to get back. Go and support the other podcasts that need a bit of love. Awesome. All right. So today's guest is Satya Byock. She's a psychotherapist and the author of Quarter Life, The Search for Self in Early Adulthood. This book was published this year and it's brilliant. I absolutely loved it. And you'll hear about my insights as we talk about it in the interview. Her writing is driven by the desire to influence how developmental psychology attends to the first 20 years of adulthood, incorporating a social justice lens as well as search towards meaning in the first half of adulthood, instead of just stability. Because so many people focus on this stability, yet there are these two types of people, stability types and meaning types. And honestly, I'm a meaning type. So reading this book was just, I could never understand why I couldn't force myself to do things that I really didn't want to do. And oh my God, it blew my mind. But listen to the interview. It's going to be amazing. Satya's clinical work, writing and teaching are rooted in Jungian psychology, activism, trauma-informed care, and historical research. Satya teaches online at the Salomon Institute, which she founded and directs. Go check out the links in the show notes. She's actually got a program coming up on this book. It's pretty freaking awesome. Go check out the interview, then go check out our website. And if you read the book, leave a review. Thanks, everyone. You are rock stars. Enjoy the episode. Hey, everyone, and welcome to today's episode of the Human Design Podcast. Today I have with me such a fascinating and inspiring guest that I got to be honest, I wish it wasn't just like a couple of weeks ago that your book came out. This would have been really freaking handy for me at the age of 28. But welcome to the podcast, Satya Doyle Byock. How are you?
I'm great. It's fun to be here. I'm excited to talk.
Yeah, I'm so excited to talk to you. Now, for all of the listeners out there, Satya is a pure generator for one, and talk about being on purpose. I absolutely love this book. So the book that you have recently launched is called Quarter Life, and it's that time, and I'm going to get you to talk to it obviously a lot more than me, but that time between our late teens or mid-teens. When I was reading it, I was like, wow, my son is just going into this, and you know, I can see my ego playing out, and, you know, what's coming out of my voice gratefully because of the work that I do is like, what do you like? What lights you up? What are you curious about? You know, this very different way of raising kids. But I actually myself went through a very challenging time. As I said, at 28, I was diagnosed with depression and panic disorder. And I had this decade of really trying to find myself. And I genuinely, I know, and I believe there are so many of our listeners out there that are currently experiencing this quarter life. So could you please introduce a little bit about yourself, and then we'll move on to this book. And I really want to talk about these sort of two, let's call them buckets or types, because obviously both you and I share this whole, we don't want to pinpoint, tell you who you are, you know, take you out of one dogma and move you into another, but these beautiful two buckets that give real direction to this time of life. But let's start at the beginning. Tell the listeners a little bit about you and what brought you here to today.
Great. Yeah, it opens up a lot of things for us to talk about already. So I am a psychotherapist, and I knew when I was in my crisis in my early 20s, and I talk about this in the book, but I found Carl Jung's work, Jungian psychology, and started to feel clear for the first time in a long time. Like, wait a second, there is a modality out there. There is a structure, a line of thinking, a theory base that aligns with my brain and my body, and started to give me some sense of direction. So when I went to graduate school to study Jungian psychology, I knew right away that what I wanted to do was open a private practice specifically for people in this time of life, specifically for people in what I now call quarter life, which is adult development between the ages of adolescence and midlife. That's how I understand it now. And I have really taken to calling it quarter life. I call it quarter life beyond the crisis, which is to say that there is a stage of human development that has gotten very little attention, and it's gone by a lot of different names. But until I started using quarter life, I really found myself stumbling all the time to understand this stage of life that isn't just a modifier of other stages. It's not just young adulthood. It's not just extended adolescence. And it's not just quote unquote millennials or Gen Zers or boomers, right? There's a stage of life that's timeless, and we need to be talking about it more. So that has really been this passion project of mine for a long time now. Both trying to understand myself, but really witnessing it wasn't just me that was in crisis. It was so many people who were struggling also, not just for like 1 year or 1 month, but this was going on for years and years of, wait a second, why is this so hard? Why is this so difficult? Why am I suffering so much? And also, why is the world on fire? What's going on, right? So many questions all at once. So the book is called Quarter Life, The Search for Self in Early Adulthood. And I really wrote it for people in this stage of life, but with the hopes that clinicians and parents and grandparents would also really enjoy reading it to gain more of an understanding of this period of time.
Yeah. Oh my God. I love it. And it's so fascinating to me because I've literally spent 2 decades working on myself now, and not to say that it's ever going to end. But I'm also very conscious not to sort of spend too much time down the dark holes, because I just, where our focus goes, right? But one of the things I loved about this book is I felt this overwhelming sense of, oh my God, I really am normal, and I don't love this term normal, but our psyche does, it just likes to know that it's normal, that everything is okay. And what you just said, I think is really powerful, is that it's not something just that happens. And a lot of our listeners might talk about their Saturn return, or they might talk about their Uranus opposition, or, in my more corporate practice, we talked about midlife crisis. It's not about these sort of like the 3 to 5 year blocks or the 2 or 1 year block. It is actually this much larger time of development. And I know for me that I carried a lot of guilt and shame. I was like, why can't I work this out? Why can't I get this shit sorted faster? I don't understand. And just reading this book, the first thing for me that really made me, that really resonated was my first incarnation was in advertising. And I noticed very quickly that I had all these friends and peers that could force themselves to do things that they didn't want to do. And no matter how hard I tried to force myself into this paradigm, I couldn't. I just couldn't. So when you started talking about the stability and the meaning types, I was like, oh my God, mind blown. So could you start to talk a little bit about that? These 2 types that we have, I love to sort of think about it like one of us is our natural muscle that we build without realizing. And then the other one is kind of like the muscle that we have to consciously build. Because I know I didn't bring real structure, and I resisted structure so hard for so long. And it wasn't until I started to get into my early 40s that I was like, okay, I really need to master this thing. So could you introduce the listeners to the 2 types and maybe give them those insights that'll help them align to maybe what's natural in them, and then maybe what they need to build the muscle around?
Sure, absolutely. So I love the way you describe this in your own experience, because I resonate with that, certainly, of feeling like, I talk about in the book that I had sort of finally gotten legitimate career job as a project manager at a tech startup. I was being paid way better than I'd been paid prior. And I was really doing my best, but it was not easy for me. And my soul was dying. I could feel my soul shriveling very fast. So, that was one particular crisis, but I had the same experience, that there were people around me that were not struggling in the same way, So that's one piece of my journey that resonates with yours. But, in the book, I lay out these 2 types, the meaning types and the stability types. And on this spectrum, or this continuum of 2 types, it's certainly a binary, but the intention is that it's about finding wholeness between the 2, between the experiences of stability and meaning, versus just staying on one side of the seesaw or the other, right? Mm-hmm. We want balance. We don't want imbalance. So for me, stability, I think of as structure, as safety, and also as society. Stability is the external world. It's saying, in this time, in this world, in this place, how can I find some quality of structure and stability? And so those stability types tend to be more comfortable conforming to social norms in one way or another, or they have an easier time acting as if. And this gets complicated when you start talking about truly individual journeys, right? Because these show up differently for different people. But there's a sense of kind of participation in society and structure. For meaning types, it's a type that is really more oriented to the inner world, that struggles much more to engage with society and the external world. We could easily kind of talk about meaning types as being the artists or the spiritual seekers or the philosophers, the poets, etc. Not everybody easily lands in those kinds of categories, right? But they're folks that seem to be floundering more in quarter life. And what I talk about in my book is that as far as developmental psychology is concerned, we've kind of really only ever focused on stability types, as I call them. We've really only focused on folks who are in some form succeeding and then having midlife crises. Folks who have never been able to succeed much in quarter life, in this first stage of adulthood, have kind of just been written out of developmental psychology. And so they're people they're depressives. They're people who are addicts. They commit suicide. They struggle. They just are floundering in various ways. Then the people who succeed in some form, we call them geniuses. We applaud them. Maybe they somehow become famous musicians or poets, whatever. And so they're sort of outsiders in their own way, right? Yeah. But we really haven't cataloged this part of quarter life in the developmental journey because it hasn't fit our conception of people who follow a linear path and then have questions of meaning in quarter life. Yeah. So the book is really trying to normalize various ways that we engage with this stage of life.
Yeah, I love that. And I think what's really incredibly powerful is just giving, as I said, I want to go back to this time, like giving people this really tangible, it's this wide open area, if you like. It's we could be going through this for an extended period of time. And I think one of the things that a lot of people struggle with is, and I know for me, I often joke that I'm a late bloomer. I did have a very successful advertising career, but I didn't do it in the inverted commas normal way. I kind of just did it as best I could and then burnt out and kind of got out. But one of the things I'd love to talk to is, do you find with your experience, like, do a lot of people get to a point where maybe they're meaning types and they've tried and they just can't fit in and they give up? Or maybe they're this stability types and they're like, well, it's just too scary, it's just too dangerous not to do life the way I'm conditioned to do. I suppose my question is, for those of people that have been living kind of out of alignment with their own uniqueness for a long period of time, and they're potentially feeling like, because I felt for so many years like I should just give up this search for whatever this bloody thing is that I'm looking for. I should just give up and force myself. And of course I couldn't do those things. But right. How can people, I suppose one of the things I'm trying to give my listeners is inspiration to know that there are ways that you can navigate through this, and you actually are probably more in your genius than you realize. It's just that you're looking through this frame of who you think you should be compared to the other type. And what I mean by that is, another part of the book that really spoke to me was in relationships. So oftentimes there might be a stability and a meaning type in a relationship. And I instantly thought of my husband and his brother, for example, or even my husband and I. And I feel like, and I know this is one big roundabout question, but I'm kind of coming to this place, like I was working with my husband and I feel like we've flipped, we've kind of gone from one to the other. Is that possible? Like,
yes, totally. It's so common. Well, it's so common. I mean, Jungian psychology, the idea of the midlife crisis, I'm going to get just sort of theoretical here for a second, but a lot of what I draw on is Jungian psychology. But what happened for me when I started encountering this material that was very exciting to me is there is so much repetition about what Jungians call the second half of life that I found myself feeling shut out, or kind of like, once again, I was an anomaly. which I just didn't think was the case, because I could see around me that people were suffering all over the place. And I knew that I wasn't alone in that in history, right? So something was off. In any case, the field talks a lot about midlife and the second half of life and all this, but a core part of what is spoken about in that space is that people tend to sort of live out one aspect of themselves. And in the Jungian world, we talk about it as the masculine and the feminine. There's some gender stuff there that gets very antiquated, and I really tried to update that for my own book. But the notion was sort of women would live out their feminine, and then they would at midlife need to, on the journey to kind of psychological androgyny, flip to the opposite and start building careers and whatnot. And men would have done this career work in the external world, and then they flip to their opposite. They start discovering they have an emotional life and an inner life, or, romantic, intimate life, all this. So that it was sort of understood at the time that midlifers were doing these big flips, because it's like they'd exhausted one tank and had to switch over to another tank or something, right? They were seeking balance.
That.
Yeah. So I really, again, my hope is that if we can kind of psychologically introduce people to this stuff younger and younger, that we don't have to kind of run out one journey and then need to just switch, because the switch is exhausting. It's hugely catastrophic and painful and confusing to have to completely reinvent yourself or find, new ways of being, but that we can journey. And I often make this kind of snake-like motion with my hand. Jung called it the serpentine journey, but it's this kind of Taoist, all these different religions and spiritual paths that speak about balance. We're seeking one side and the other, right? So I talk about couples, one who's a meaning type, one who's a stability type. They learn from each other, right? This is why opposites attract. We're attracted to what we don't understand yet, right? Yeah. And siblings often split meaning types and stability types. You can see this in siblings often. People, kids split this growing up, and they judge each other, and then they play off of each other. But if we kind of know that that's happening, then we judge ourselves less, we can judge our partners less, and instead be curious, like, oh, you know something I don't know. Yeah. What are you doing that doesn't make any sense to me? And yet something's happening for you, right?
Yeah, I absolutely love that. And I feel like it's really in alignment with human design. We talk about it, it's the science of differentiation. And you really talk a lot about this uniqueness and differentiation throughout the book. And I feel that especially as we look to our kids, this is one of the most powerful things we can be teaching, their uniqueness, that yes, there are similarities that we're going to go through in journeys, but it does come down to really discovering what's true for you. This is a question I'm constantly saying to my clients, like, what is true for you? What I would love to talk about next is these 4 pillars that you talk about in the book. I want to ask directly again, in my human design, I'm a line 3. So everything's experiential for me. It's why I'm constantly, everything gets compared back to my experience. And the separation piece and the rite of passage, I thought this was so incredibly powerful. So, and it's not a gender thing, but I actually have 2 boys. So it really hit home with me. And one of the most important things for me is teaching my kids responsibility, when you take an action, there are consequences and you're responsible for those. Even though we're here for you, we've got you, and more than anything, it's teaching them that they can believe in themselves, The separation piece for me, when I was reading it, I was listening to it on an audiobook, and we actually went to pick up a puppy on the weekend, and we had a long drive. So my husband and I were listening, and I had this moment that was like, oh my God, because you were talking about separation and how, and obviously I'd love you to talk in your wisdom as opposed to just the pieces I picked up, about this separation and how important it is that we can step away from our parents, that we can actually, like in Indigenous communities, like for the Indigenous Australians, that they go and walk about, like they literally, or they send them out onto some sort of ritual that helps them really learn to separate. And I had this moment where I had to stop the book and talk to my husband. I was like, oh my God, my separation was, I kept trying to separate, I left home at 18. At 24, I went overseas, and I just kept trying to separate from my mother, but she just kept drawing me back in. So I would really love can you talk about the 4 pillars, but can you also talk to that? It's kind of like the separation reversed, but you do talk about it with one of these amazing characters that you create through the book, which just makes it so much easier to integrate. But yeah, I'd love to hear your interpretation of that, like me trying to separate, but constantly.
Oh gosh, it's so common. I think it's the most common experience because we don't know what is psychologically required for this time of life. We don't really understand it. We don't talk about it. And so all of these quarter lifers are trying to self-initiate. I mean, that's the term that I use that a lot of folks in the Jungian world use, is this idea of self-initiation, that if we don't get it from ritual, if we don't get it from culture, if we don't get it from any kind of training, that our psyche has to sort of try to manifest it in some way. But because we don't have language around it, then the archetype sort of has nothing to kind of latch onto, right? So it's a lot of floundering and confusion. So the 4 pillars in the book, I lay out initially the 2 types and the 2 goals, which is, that we all as quarter lifers have a desire to find both stability and meaning, and that we start on one side of that journey more or less, than the other, so that there are types who kind of start at stability and seek meaning ultimately, and types that start at meaning and ultimately seek stability. But that along the way, then the journey is what I call the 4 pillars of growth. And I think of these as pillars. You could sort of think of it as like tree branches that you're hooking onto, or flags in the ground. I mean, something that's like, we're coming back to these things, we're witnessing them. They're not boxes to check, because there's really no way to ever completely fully accomplish them. I mean, I imagine on some level, maybe I'm wrong here, but that you're still doing separation work with your mother in some form or another, right? Internally, externally, right? It continues. Okay. So that's the thing, right? We're always doing this work. We're always coming back to them. But the 4 pillars are to separate, to listen, to build, and to integrate. And this is all psychological work as well as relational work. It's internal work, it's external work, right? To separate, and you did a beautiful introduction of it, is this ancient work that was understood by earlier cultures worldwide, of some way to transform a child's psyche into an adult's psyche. So I talk in the book about psychological maturity, about adulthood being a psychological process, not just the acquisition of a mortgage, or a good job, right? Or a marriage or whatever. It's psychological. So how do we do this work psychologically? A huge component of this is to transform our earlier childhood dependency and relationships with people who, you talk about getting a puppy, right? It's like everything with younger creatures, we feed them, we take care of their bodily functions. We, sign them up for camp. I mean, whatever these things are, there's constant dependency. We're emotionally caring for them, right? How does a person then transition into truly taking care of themselves and truly taking care of others, but being their own center of gravity versus leaning into a parent, a guardian, whomever as a center of gravity? How does a young person find a center of gravity with which they can comfortably go out into the world? We don't have culture that supports that. Most modern cultures worldwide have really been stripped of those transitional spiritual rituals or psychological training that help people to do that. So of course you were trying to separate over and over. I did it. Yeah, we all, and for some people, their parents have passed away. What do? For some people, they're adopted. There are tragedies. How do we then separate from tragedy and difficulty with our guardians, whomever raised us? So there's a lot of questions in here. I try to cover as much of that material through the case studies as I can, but that's the first pillar. And I love hearing how you're reviewing your own coming of age with it.
I loved it. And one of the things I thought was really powerful, and you just touched on it again, is, like there's some of us that almost can't get closure. And my mum's still on planet Earth, but
Yeah.
she refuses to talk about anything, like she's really, really closed down. So the other thing that I loved about the book was it was really helping me to understand that there were other ways that I could, inverted commas, get my answers or that sort of thing. So I thought that was really, really powerful because, my sort of rite of passage was I joked a lot, like I kind of raised myself, although I had these parents that supported me, they sent me to a good school, rah, 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 rah. I was the one that was emotionally supporting them and their relationship and all of that sort of stuff. So I just loved listening to, even at 47, like I'm still in that place. And as a parent, I'm so aware that I'm very conscious of making sure that my children aren't or never think they're responsible for my emotional well-being, or, trying to build these kids that they will say, and again, this is kind of in alignment with human design and their designs, because they've got these very independent energies as it is, like letting them, especially my 15-year-old, he's going to inform, he's going to say, okay, I'm planning to, or I'd like to do this on the weekend and go here and instead of asking for permission. Like he's in that age now that it's starting to be like, this is what I'd like to do. And I get that it's a form of permission because we all have to kind of be agreed. But this was, just listening to that separation piece, I was like, oh, that just feels really good, because although I'm, imperfectly implementing, because that's basically who I am. We all are, we're all imperfectly implementing. That separation piece, I think, especially the experience that I went through with my parents, that it is something that we can be conscious of on the other side, like really helping our children to separate and to feel comfortable to step out and know that we're there, but not trying to grab them, and tell them what they should, or that's going to hurt, or, that sort of thing. So I loved that separation piece. I thought it was so powerful.
Wow. Well, and it brings up so much as you're talking about my own experiences. I was sort of throwing myself out into the world. I was so deeply, profoundly restless from early on, but I was traveling abroad by myself. I did a major trip when I was 19 and a major trip when I was 20 and 21 by myself into countries that, aren't always considered the safest places to travel, certainly at the time. And my parents, let me, I don't know if let me is the right term, but they didn't hold me back. And I was really impressed with that at the time, because I can kind of imagine how painful or confusing that was for them. But I'm more impressed with it now, because I can only imagine, what it is to watch your 19-year-old child get on the plane for a, what we would call a developing country, to a village somewhere, and not have constant access, right? There was a lot of trust involved in that, but it was so monumentally important for my development. There was still years and years and years of confusion, because it's really a very long process of separating and making sense of yourself and making sense of the world and feeling like, okay, I can stand up on my own 2 feet. And but yeah, I really just honor your experience of that as a parent, because it's a lot to make sense of. Oof.
It certainly is. And I love what you said. I think one of the other things that I just had to touch on, and then I'm going to let you keep going, is, I listened to the book, and it also gave me this, and I suppose I know these things, but every time I hear them, they just go deeper, that permission, that the relationships with parents and children, the permission that it is constantly changing. Because as a daughter, my mother is definitely, bless her cotton socks, I love her, but she is on the narcissistic scale. And I didn't even realize until, recently, a number of years ago, but not that long ago. So it also is that beautiful way that we can say, especially the way you tell the story through the characters and how they're evolving and developing their own individual identities, and just gave me permission yet again to say that relationship is allowed to shift and change, because I know that one of the things that my mother found really hard was that I wasn't, and in hindsight and everything I know now and the work that I do, I'm like, oh, that was really unresourceful that I was her best friend. However, again, just giving permission that these relationships are going to shift and change, and it's okay if you want to be separate. Exactly. It's okay. I thought it was really beautiful, but I'll let you get on to the next pillar.
Yeah, well, I love all that. Again, I just want to emphasize, yes, they have to change. The relationships have to change. If they don't change, it's like being stuck in quicksand. I mean, you can't move, you can't grow, right? We have to transform these relationships. And I will say too, it's the same with churches or political parties or college friends or whomever. Like, it's not just parents. This work of separation means really shifting out of whatever feels like, even in the tiniest murmurs, this is holding me back. This isn't who I am. This isn't right. This isn't what I would choose as a conscious adult. It's what I landed in as a growing person,
Love that.
And that leads me into the second pillar, to listen. That listening is about this more introverted, some might call it the more feminine, the more yin, the more receptive. It's really honoring the work to witness ourselves, our bodies, our likes and dislikes, our souls, our tendencies and relationships, our allergies with food, all of these things. It's to take ourselves seriously. Some people don't like that phrase, take ourselves seriously, but I just mean it as a real witnessing of oneself, to say, I exist as a singular individual on this planet. And there are many ways I'm like other people, as you said earlier, but there's many ways that I'm unique, and that I might make fun of myself for being unique. I might be inflated for being unique in certain ways, but it's starting to just witness it. Okay, who am I? Who am I? Who am I, even though I have those nasty voices in my head from so-and-so, or who am I, even though so-and-so never believed I could do these things? It's just starting to allow ourselves to notice how we fit in the world. So it's how do I fit as a singular person out there in the larger world? And part of it I think of as sort of a continuation of like the work we do as toddlers. I putting this thing in my mouth and that thing in my mouth and touching that thing and ouch, that's hot. And we're just continuing to test our environments, but as adults, so that we're going further, we're testing new things, we're exploring new things, right? But continuing to say, do I like this? Do I not like this? So it's really, again, just sort of this more self-oriented stage. And do you want me to go on to the next pillar?
I just want to say one other thing on this. I love it. And you do talk about in the book the Goldilocks metaphor, and I love the Goldilocks metaphor. And one of the pieces that I just wanted to touch on, it just dropped out of my head, but it'll come back, was... Oh, come back. Please come back. I should have written it down.
Toddlers, testing environments, going out in the world.
I know what it was. So one of the things we sort of, especially in the classes that I teach or the programs, oftentimes one of the patterns that I see a lot of is people come in and their critical voice is having a crack at them constantly about their superpowers. It's actually who they're here to be. And I feel like that's a lot of what this, listening, because oftentimes, and I know I was doing this for years, is I was literally trying to transform or change or up level or, improve my performance, like criticizing something that was actually innately wise or brilliant or, really great about me. And this process of starting to listen to the physical body, again, through human design, we talk about getting out of the mind and into the body. And starting to test out almost new meanings, right? It's that new meanings. It's like, oh, hang on a second. I've been criticizing myself for being a certain way, but what if I don't come from that shadow? What if I don't come from that critical? What is the upside of this? So I really love that listen, not only because we're so often told to listen to others. And that is a brilliant trait, everyone. Please do not get me wrong. It's like it is one of the best skills you can ever learn, active listening. However, this listening to ourselves, we're never taught that. We're never taught. And I work with so many people that are just developing their intuition and that sort of thing. And they're like blown away with how much access they have to guidance, intuition, knowing all of these things. And if we're not listening and we're not taught to listen, it's almost like oftentimes we make those things bad about ourselves or not mean anything. And when you started talking about this pillar, the statement that really just popped for me in my mind was, it's this pillar of really understanding that you matter. that you really
Yes,
matter.
that's right. Oh, I love that. Exactly. Yeah. And, as you speak of it, it reminds me, there's a lot of talk of the inner child, right? Of taking care of the inner child and witnessing the inner child. And I'm really aware that the irony of this, I will say, may be that I knew pretty early on I didn't want to parent. I didn't want my own children. And that I also didn't really love being a child. I was a very earnest young person, so I'm sort of conscious of this as I say this, but that the idea of the inner child has never resonated with me that deeply. And it's a huge part of what people talk about in psychology often is caring for the inner child. I tend to experience it more as caring for the inner cat or the inner puppy.
I love it.
Or even the inner plant, that it's like witnessing, when does this creature, that particular sound that it makes, is it hungry? Is it sad? Is it wanting to play? Is it bored? Or noticing with a house plant, when, how long does it take for you to witness that plant needs water? That plant needs more sun. It's subtle witnessing that's nonverbal, because the inner child, I think part of the reason that's used is that it's often nonverbal. It's a nonverbal relationship. It sometimes can be verbal, certainly, but it's this unconscious embodied relationship where when we say I matter or to declare you matter, for me, it really is more of a relationship in that to say this thing that I'm caring for in this body, this shared relationship through life that I have with my soul, whatever you want to call it, my embodied soul, I need to take care of that being, that creature, and to do that, I need to know what it likes and doesn't like, and where it's comfortable and where it feels safe and where it feels excited and where it feels afraid. And that work is critical work for this stage of life. And we are not taught to do that, right? Instead, people in quarter life are told to stop being narcissistic, to stop being navel gazers, there's constant ridicule of people in this time of life. So just as they might start to really witness themselves in that deeper way, they're snapped out of it by being made fun of by every clickbait article in the world, right? So it is so much permission to say, you matter, and you are in a relationship, a very tender relationship with yourself. And that needs kindness and care and attention.
Yeah, I love that. So beautifully said. Okay, what is their next pillar?
Okay, so the third pillar, right? The third pillar I call to build, right? It's a really natural pair for that listening stage. And it's really, in a way, it's very simple, right? It's first or in this ongoing journey, right? We're witnessing ourselves, we're witnessing how we are in the world, what we need, etc. We're witnessing what we most want. And then build is the actualization. It's the pair of the yin. It's more of the yang. It's more of the willpower. It's more of the dedication, the determination. It's more Saturnian if we're talking in astrological language. I think of build as really a very Saturn pillar. It is consistency, right? So it's like, it could be anything. Like growing up, or rather in my quarter life, I'd always ridden a bike. I had grown up, I knew how to ride a bike from when I was a kid and all this, but there was something in me in quarter life, and I think it was needing to become more embodied, but I just had this subtle but kind of persistent desire to learn to cycle more consistently, right? It didn't have a point. It wasn't going to make me money. I wasn't going to enter a cycling competition. My body just wanted that experience more and more. So I was also lazy and kind of didn't wanna, all this. But for me, part of building in quarter life was saying, okay, and saying, get on my bike and commute on my bike and get my bike, fixed up when it needed to be, and buy that little thing so it's more comfortable, and just caring for myself in that way, right? Yeah. That's just one example for me of something that, I want to put this in quotes, but was pointless again, right?
Yeah.
It wasn't on my linear journey to make money or find a partner, but it was part of what my body and soul needed to feel right in the world. And it took effort, and it took dedication and consistency, right? So that's that pillar.
I love that. And of course, I have to just pipe in with a bit of, because I think it's really powerful. I love this pointlessness. I think this is really, and I want to come back to it, because one of the things I noticed that I did is because I was taught really young that achievement equaled love, as opposed to when I took up surfing, there's part of me that was like, well, I have to be really good at this. So I really did have to come to that place where I learned pointlessness, and I'm still not great at it. Like, I'm practicing all the time. Like, what do you mean I just have to do it for no reason? Like my ego really wrestled with that. Right. So I'll get to that. I'd love to sort of hear your response to that. But the other thing that I think is so powerful about this pillar and where it sits is that it comes after separation and listen. I think so many of us, we're all taught, and I did exactly the same thing, is like to, bolt out of the gates. I mean, I was never getting married. And if I got married, I was going to get married late. Nope. I met Justin really young. We got engaged. We got married really quickly. And I remember actually telling one of my dearest friends, because we met in London, I called one of my dearest friends who had been my boss for many years. And I was like, oh, I've met this guy and we're going to get married. And he was like, what now? Like, what are you talking about? And obviously it all worked out. We're coming up to our 22-year anniversary, and there was some massive hiccups in the middle, but, of course they were, because we didn't even know who we were. Of course. But right. This is what I love, where build comes in the process, is that first you separate, and this is this journey of, oh, wow, who am I in this world without this support net? Then we get to listen, and we start to really listen to what's true for me, what's going on inside of here, developing our, our internal world and our external world. And then we build, because I feel like I've only ever got good at building, post 40, and it's because I did, have to, in a way, I dragged myself backwards through the mulberry bushes for a really long time, trying to answer the big questions about who am I and why am I here and why isn't it happening right now? So I love that this pillar actually comes after the internal work and that separation, the finding the self, and then going into build. I think that's so beautiful.
Yes, and you remind me in saying that, I mean, part of what I talk about with the stability types in particular, so the book is structured in such a way that I introduce 4 characters. 2 of them are stability types, 2 of them are meaning types, and they, as we kind of move through the book, are moving through these pillars of growth. And so what happens in the build stage for both of the stability types is really what needs to happen first is that they deconstruct, they sort of unbuild what they have previously built on some level, because what happens for so many of us, and certainly for people who are very devoted to sort of trying to do what society asks of them, is we end up building the wrong life.
Yeah.
We too often are constructing what we think we're supposed to be doing, what other people want us to be doing, what is going to help us to fit in. And then people feel trapped by the lives they've created, right? That generally we're creating something. I mean, more or less, most folks are creating something, but stability types tend to be really good at creating things and making things happen and getting out there. And the problem is they can often end up building the wrong thing, right? And really feeling stuck. And so with stability type clients, we sort of start working on slowly, brick by brick, deconstructing, or if there's been a catastrophe and some kind of failure, failure in the system, we work on rebuilding then from scratch. What do you really want now? What's really true for you?
Yeah. And I love that. I think it's so important. I feel like I work with so many clients that go through that process, and in itself, it's terrifying. I want my listeners to hear, if this sounds familiar, we get it. It's terrifying because, you're fundamentally underpinned by stability. You want this safety, security, stability. However, it really is one of the most powerful journeys to start to, like you say, like pull it apart and put it back together. And I love, I actually have a client that one of your characters really reminded me of, because she had this corporate life. Then she went to do this art course, if you like. Yeah. And she discovered she's this incredible painter, and it's giving me goosebumps. So I
Wow.
love that process that,
Yeah.
there are so many stability types out there that they're feeling that urge inside of them, their greatness, and it's waking up. And I really feel, again, with this book, you give people such a step-by-step process of, you're okay, you're normal, you're safe, there are things you can do, and this is the journey that you can go on. So I think it's really beautiful the way you articulate it. It's so powerful.
Well, it's, I will say one thing that I keep hearing in people's reviews of the book so far, and it's just, again, as you said, been out for a few weeks, but people are saying that they feel seen by the book.
Yeah.
And I can't imagine, a greater thing for me to hear as an author of somebody who's been really trying to put these ideas out there. But it's amazing to really see people feeling themselves normalized and witnessed by the book. And I love that. So I'm glad that's your experience
so good.
too.
So
Yeah.
good. So tell us what is the last pillar?
Yeah. So the last pillar, it's, I call it to integrate. It's integration. And it's really allowing, even though there's never an end to this journey, even maybe in death, we don't know how this journey ends. It seems to be ongoing. It seems to be cyclical and circular. And I really name that in the book. We're not just checking boxes. We're not climbing a ladder here. That's not what life is, right? But we need moments to celebrate and honor culmination and to be in awe of life. And what I have witnessed over and over and over again, I'm so glad to be able to say, is that when I see clients really, things start to fall into place, all this work they've done. And sometimes it means getting on the right medication. It means getting out of an abusive relationship. I mean, these things don't just happen, or finally getting a grant, or getting money to go to school, or getting a better job. Like, these things are connected to the external world. It's not just inner work in a vacuum, right? But when you start to see things come together and people's lives start to blossom, it's just absolutely extraordinary. And each time it happens in a way that I couldn't have conceived when they walked in my door, right? It's like, I didn't have a map for them. I had no idea. People come up with the most unique, incredible, individual ways of expressing themselves, and wanting to be in the world that in a million years I could never have guessed for each person, right? So to see that starting to manifest is stunning. And it really is, it's a representation, it's a manifestation of stability and meaning coming into relationship in somebody's life, of listening and building coming into relationship in someone's life, of the masculine and feminine, the yin and the yang. There's this experience of wholeness that starts to blossom, and it's incredible. And so the pillar of integration is a witnessing of culmination. It's not saying this is the end of the road. It's not saying you will never have difficulties again, but it's saying, wow, something culminated.
Yeah.
And really taking time to celebrate that and witness that together.
Oh my God, I love it. And again, like, this is my experience. For so many years, I worked on the external strategy, strategy. And I love this integration piece because, for 20 years, I studied everything. And my story was that I got a diagnosis. And I think you actually said one of the characters got a similar diagnosis. And that was that I was depressed and I had panic disorder, and that I would have it for the rest of my life. So I'd learn how to manage it. And in that moment, I was like, no, that's not an option. That just wasn't an option for me. It was either that's the end of it, or I find a way to heal myself. And of course, I look back now and go, yes, that was brilliant. Like, where did that courage and strength come from? Because it's certainly, I didn't feel a lot of it, but it was that moment. And like I said, and that was 28. And by the time I hit about 42, so my Uranus opposition, my entire life had flipped and changed, and I'd retrained as a master coach. I had a corporate business. I had 2 young kids. I'd navigated, my husband and I had navigated really challenging relationship issues to, again, become 2 whole individuals in a relationship instead of 2, dysfunctional people trying to make the other one whole. And I love this integration piece because from that 42, and when I really was like, well, shit, if I'm going to do life, I may as well just do it my way. I may as well just be me. You know, I've done the hard yards. I know I don't fit in. I'm not normal. You know, I was really happy as a, you know, predominantly meaning type. I just shut everyone out. Like as a kid, it was much easier to live in my imagination and to, you know, I would play games with one of my friends, but also on my own, like going through the back garden and finding things in the dirt and pretending that we were aliens and we'd come to this planet Earth and we were trying to work out what these humans were doing, you know, like that really worked for me. Yeah. And I think this integration piece, as you said, is really powerful because we work so hard on external strategies. Okay. Yeah. You know, what's the next thing? What's the next guru? I've got to try this. I've got to try that. And we go external first. And one of my biggest, most profound learnings, and I remember having that moment when I was sitting in my in a training one day, I was like, we all go external first. We've got to go internal first, you know, and that real, like, that's when we get to that place of that integration. Like, okay, I've listened, I've integrated, I've separated, I've run the what happens when I do this, what happens when I do that, and you get to that point where you do know yourself and life does become easier. It's not to say that you don't have challenges, but I now know, being where I am in the world, is that if I'm faced with a challenge and I haven't traversed it, transcended it, moved through it yet, it's because I've stopped listening to me, or I've stopped trusting myself. It's that integration piece, I feel like, is when you get to that place like, okay, I'm not meant to fit in. I'm not meant to do it the way everyone else does it. There's going to be things that are a little bit challenging. And going back to the bike metaphor, I just want to touch on this and maybe get your insight, is because we talk a lot, or I talk a lot about this thing, we're either outside of our comfort zone or we're out of alignment. And we have to understand that there is a difference. Because when we're out of alignment, it can still feel uncomfortable. When we're in alignment, it can still feel uncomfortable. And so many people stop there. And I feel like, especially where I am in my journey, this has been really profound to understand that, oh, this is uncomfortable because I haven't done it before, or this is uncomfortable because my ego wants to keep me the same. But we still need to have that discomfort, like you talk about with the bike, so that we can continue to evolve. Because although things will become more easy and effortless because we know ourselves, trust ourselves, and accept ourselves more, we still need to understand the difference between being out of our comfort zone and being out of alignment. Do you want to talk to that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, I think what you're speaking to is besides separating from one's, parents, guardians, whomever, churches, et cetera. I think what you're speaking to is the core issue of quarter life, is really differentiating those voices. It's differentiating the voice of something's wrong. I'm not where I'm supposed to be. Somebody's being mean to me. Somebody's filling my head with bullshit. This isn't right for me. This isn't healthy, from I feel uncomfortable, but I'm growing.
Yeah.
This I feel I feel yucky because I'm detoxing from the bad stuff, but I'm heading to the good stuff. Right. Differentiating those voices is huge work in this time of life. And it's certainly easier as we get older and we know ourselves. We just know. I mean, there's, I can say I could cross somebody on the street now, or speak to somebody, out in society, who years ago in my 20s might have pulled me in with self-hatred or confusion or self-questioning, or they were selling me something, God knows what. It might have spun me out. I was spun out over and over and over because I didn't know how to set the boundaries to say, oh, I'm actually pretty discerning and sensitive. This person doesn't know me at all. Right. I was handing so much of my power, as so many people do, to the other people. Right. And it was spinning me out. I just don't do that anymore. It's just not that confusing to me anymore, because I'm older and you learn and blah, blah, blah. But at the time, differentiating those voices from being out of alignment, from pushing oneself, is really complicated, So the first thing, to just name that, it's hard. Right.
Yeah.
But it's something that everyone's really trying to sort through who's on this journey at all, And I think it starts by sort of noticing as much as you can to go back to the roots of the impulse. Did this impulse come from an Instagram post of insecurity? Did it come from somebody trying to sell you something? Did it come from a nasty or sort of even quasi complimentary comment, or did this impulse come from a deep, dark place inside that says, I want that. I need that. I can't explain it, but I want and need that,
I love that. I love that. It's so true. And again, it's that journey, isn't it? That we have to learn to go internal first and then external. I think that's so powerful. Now, I'm super conscious of your time, and I feel like I could actually talk to you about a million things for the next 3 hours, but I'm going to let you go. Thank you so much for joining me on the podcast and sharing these insights from the book. I really genuinely go check it out, people. Obviously, we're going to put the details in the show notes. But where else can people find you, Satya?
Well, let me just say how much I enjoyed talking to you as well. This is really fun. It's just wonderful, delightful to dive into this material, with someone who really understands it and is excited about it too. So thank you for your interest. People can find me at my websites. I have an author website, satyabyock.com. It's just my first and last name. I use my middle name. You can get there with that too, but it's a long, complicated name. So satyabyock.com. And then I teach through an institute online, the Salome Institute of Jungian Studies, and that's salomeinstitute.com. And I am going to be teaching a class soon that's on the book, kind of book related too. So I'm looking forward to diving in more and being able to be in more of these conversations with folks live around some of this material.
So good. So go and check out the book, peeps, because it is fantastic. Thanks again. I think I might have to have you back because I want to go down so many different rabbit holes.
I love that. No, it's really fun. I would look forward to that. It'd be beautiful.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, thank you so much. Thank you everyone else out there for listening. And I look forward to having you all on the next podcast. Bye for now.
Thanks everyone for being here all the way to the end of the podcast. I hope you got lots of value out of it. I certainly had a lot of fun doing it. Could I please ask that you share this podcast with friends if you found it valuable? And also, bonus points, could you leave a review for me as well on Apple? It would be greatly appreciated. If at any point you would like to be on the podcast or you've got questions that you'd like me to discuss on the podcast, by all means, get on my socials and DM me. Everything you need is there in the show notes. Have an awesome day. Bye for now.